On Christmas Eve, my dad handed me a list that would change everything. Clean the house, prep, dinner, wrap the gifts. Your sister's guests expect everything perfect. My mom laughed from the couch, not bothering to look up from her wine glass. Don't screw this up, Ferdinand. I smiled and nodded like I always did. But something deep inside me finally snapped. That night, while they slept peacefully, assuming I'd handle everything, I booked a one-way flight to Rome. When they woke up Christmas morning to find an empty, silent house, instead of their perfectly orchestrated celebration, panic spread like wildfire. I stood in our family's pristine suburban kitchen, staring at the handwritten list my father had shoved into my hands like I was some kind of hired help. The irony wasn't lost on me that at 28 years old with a college degree and a decent job at a tech startup, I was still being treated like the family servant while my 26-year-old sister Emma lived like royalty in our parents' finished basement. The list was written in my father Robert's demanding scrawl: vacuum entire house, mop all floors, dust furniture, clean bathrooms, prepare appetizers for 20 people, cook prime rib dinner set, formal dining table wrap, remaining gifts, arrange flowers, polish silver. The tasks would take at least 12 hours of nonstop work. Emma's contribution to her own Christmas party? Absolutely nothing, except showing up and accepting compliments. This wasn't new. For years, I'd been the invisible backbone of every family gathering. While Emma basked in praise for events she had zero hand in creating. Last Thanksgiving, I spent 3 days cooking a feast for 15 relatives, while Emma got credit for organizing such a wonderful celebration. When my cousin asked her for the cranberry sauce recipe, she actually said she created it herself. It was my grandmother's recipe that I'd perfected over years of practice. My mother Patricia emerged from the living room, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite it being barely 10 in the morning. She surveyed the already spotless kitchen with her critical eye, the same look she'd been giving me since childhood. Make sure you use the good china, not that everyday stuff. Emma's boyfriend Marcus is bringing his parents, and they own half the real estate in this county. We can't have them thinking we're common. Of course, Mom, I replied automatically, though internally I wondered why her own son wasn't considered worthy of the good china treatment. And Ferdinand? She continued, adjusting her diamond bracelet. Emma worked really hard planning this party. Try not to embarrass her by being your usual awkward self around her friends. The statement hit like a physical blow. Emma had done precisely nothing to plan this party except demand it happen. I was the one who'd spent weeks researching menu options, calling caterers for price comparisons we couldn't afford, and ultimately deciding to cook everything myself to save money. I designed the centerpieces, researched wine pairings, and even created custom place cards with calligraphy I'd taught myself on YouTube. But Emma would get the credit just like she always did. I walked upstairs to start cleaning, passing Emma's bedroom door, which stood ajar. Her room looked like a boutique explosion, with designer clothes scattered across every surface and photography equipment worth more than my car taking up half the space. Ring lights, professional cameras, and editing monitors filled the room where she created content for her lifestyle blog and social media accounts. That's when I saw them. Printed email chains scattered across her desk, and something made me pause. The top email was from a potential sponsor praising Emma's innovative marketing strategies and creative content development. My blood turned cold as I recognized the phrases. Those weren't Emma's words or ideas, they were mine. I grabbed the papers with shaking hands and read through them. Email after email showed Emma forwarding my marketing concepts, my creative briefs, my strategic plans to potential brand partners. She'd been taking my professional work, the ideas I'd developed through years of education and experience, and presenting them as her own original thought. The evidence was undeniable. Timestamps showed her forwarding my detailed campaign proposals, within hours of me sharing them with her, claiming she'd spent weeks developing these innovative approaches. She'd built her entire online presence on stolen intellectual property. My intellectual property. One email from a luxury skincare brand made me physically sick. They were praising Emma's brilliant three-phase launch strategy with micro-influencer partnerships and targeted demographic analysis. I remembered creating that exact strategy during my lunch break at work, thinking I was helping my little sister grow her small blog. Instead, she'd used it to secure a $5,000 sponsorship deal that I never saw a penny of. Another email chain revealed something even worse. Emma had been coaching other influencers on her marketing methods, charging them consultation fees for strategies I'd developed. She was literally profiting off my expertise while I struggled to pay rent on my tiny studio apartment. The final email in the stack was from Marcus's marketing firm. They were discussing bringing Emma on as a consultant for their luxury real estate campaigns, impressed by her sophisticated understanding of brand positioning and market psychology. Skills she didn't possess. Knowledge she'd never studied. Success built entirely on my stolen work. I sank onto her unmade bed surrounded by evidence of years of systematic theft. Every achievement she'd celebrated, every opportunity she'd secured, every compliment our parents had given her about being so creative and business savvy, was based on a lie. She'd been stealing my professional identity while I remained invisible, unrecognized, and unpaid. The worst part was realizing our parents knew. They had to know. They'd seen me working on marketing projects, heard me explaining strategies and concepts that magically appeared in Emma's content days later. But they'd chosen to celebrate her supposed success while treating me like hired help. As I sat there holding proof of my sister's fraud, the Christmas Eve list in my pocket felt heavier than ever. One more day of being treated like a servant, while Emma took credit for everything I'd accomplished. One more day of watching her succeed with my stolen work while I cleaned up after her celebration. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be their invisible servant anymore. I wasn't going to enable Emma's fraud or accept my parents' neglect. I was going to take back control of my life starting tonight. I carefully photographed every email, every piece of evidence of Emma's theft. Then I put the papers back exactly where I'd found them, making sure nothing looked disturbed. If Emma wanted to play games with stolen success, I was about to change the rules entirely. The humiliation only intensified as the day progressed. My mother, Patricia, spent the morning following me around the house, criticizing every aspect of my cleaning, with the kind of attention to detail she never applied to Emma's responsibilities. When I vacuumed the living room, she pointed out missed corners. When I polished the coffee table, she found streaks I'd apparently left behind. When I arranged the flowers I'd bought with my own money, she rearranged them completely, claiming my aesthetic sense was lacking sophistication. Emma has such an eye for design, Patricia commented as she moved the centerpiece for the third time. She gets that from me. You were always more practical than creative. The irony burned. Those flowers were arranged using principles I'd learned in a design workshop I'd paid for myself. The color scheme and height variations were calculated using techniques I'd studied to help Emma with her content creation. But somehow my mother saw only flaws in my work while praising Emma's stolen aesthetic. My father, Robert, emerged from his home office around noon, surveying my progress with the critical eye of a drill sergeant. He owned a small accounting firm and treated our house like a business he was preparing for the most important client presentation of his career. Every surface had to gleam, every detail had to be perfect, because Marcus's family represented the kind of wealth and social status my parents desperately wanted to access. Make sure you iron the tablecloth again, Robert instructed, even though I'd already ironed it twice. The Hendersons are used to a certain standard. Marcus's father owns Henderson Development Group. They build those luxury condominiums downtown that sell for over $1 million. I'd heard this speech countless times. The Hendersons were my parents' golden ticket to social elevation, and Emma was their beautiful, successful daughter who'd somehow captured the heart of their eldest son. What they didn't know was that Emma's entire persona was built on stolen foundations, and Marcus had fallen in love with an illusion. While I continued preparing for the party, I couldn't help but overhear phone conversations that made my stomach churn. Emma was in her room talking loudly to someone about the evening's plans, and her words made everything infinitely worse. "I know, right? I've been planning this party for months." Emma gushed into her phone, probably talking to one of her influencer friends. "The menu alone took me weeks to design. I wanted something elegant but not pretentious. Classic American flavors with sophisticated presentation." Every word was a knife twist. The menu hadn't taken her weeks to design because she hadn't designed it. I had spent weeks researching testing recipes and creating a cohesive dining experience that would impress Marcus's wealthy family. I'd even special ordered ingredients from 3 different specialty stores to ensure everything was perfect. The decorations were the hardest part. Emma continued, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she used when she was performing for an audience. "I wanted this warm winter elegance theme with gold accents and natural elements. It took forever to source everything, but I think it's going to be absolutely stunning." I looked around at the decorations I'd spent 3 weekends creating, the garlands I'd crafted from fresh evergreen branches, the gold ribbon I'd carefully woven through the stair railings, the candle arrangements I'd designed using height and color theory I'd learned from online tutorials. Emma hadn't sourced anything except the credit for my work. But the conversation took an even more devastating turn when I heard Emma mention something that stopped me cold. "Actually, can you keep a secret tonight isn't just a Christmas party? Marcus is going to propose. He asked my dad's permission last week, and we've been planning this surprise engagement announcement. I told everyone it would be the perfect setting because I put so much thought into making everything magical." My heart sank into my stomach. This wasn't just another family gathering where Emma would steal credit for my work. This was her engagement announcement, the most important night of her life. And she was planning to accept a marriage proposal surrounded by decorations I'd created, eating food I'd prepared, in a celebration she was claiming full responsibility for organizing. The cruelty was breathtaking. She'd known about the proposal for a week and had let me believe this was just a regular Christmas party. She'd watched me stress about every detail, seen me spending my limited money on special ingredients and decorations, and never once mentioned that this night was actually about her engagement. Worse, she'd actively encouraged me to go above and beyond my usual efforts. Last week, she'd casually mentioned how important it was that everything be extra special because Marcus's family would be there. She'd suggested I make my famous chocolate souffle for dessert, claiming his parents had sophisticated tastes. She'd even requested specific flowers for the arrangements, saying she thought they'd photograph well. Now I understood why. She'd been planning to document every moment of her engagement, surrounded by the perfect setting I'd unknowingly created for her. She'd probably already planned the social media posts, the captions about how she'd created the perfect magical evening for the most important moment of her life. I continued my work in a daze, mechanically polishing silverware while processing this new betrayal. Emma wasn't just stealing my current work, she was stealing my contribution to what she clearly considered the pinnacle of her success. Her engagement announcement would forever be tied to a celebration she'd claimed to have orchestrated, when in reality I was the invisible architect of her perfect moment. As afternoon turned to evening, I overheard another conversation that confirmed my worst suspicions. Emma was talking to Marcus on the phone, her voice sweet and excited. "Everything looks absolutely perfect, baby. I can't wait for your parents to see what I've put together. Your mom is going to love the table settings, and your dad will definitely be impressed by the menu I created. I think they're really going to understand how much thought and care I put into making this special." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I wondered how long she'd been doing this. How many times had Emma taken credit for work she'd never done? How many successes had she built on stolen foundations? How many people believed in a version of my sister that simply didn't exist? I walked into the dining room where my carefully set table waited for the evening's guests. 24 pieces of our best china arranged with mathematical precision. Crystal glasses that caught the light from my handmade centerpieces. Silver that gleamed from hours of polishing. Napkins folded using a technique I'd learned from a hospitality tutorial. In a few hours, Emma would walk into this room with Marcus and accept his proposal, surrounded by beauty she'd never created. She'd receive congratulations for hosting the perfect engagement celebration, praise for her attention to detail, and admiration for her sophisticated taste. Our parents would beam with pride at their successful daughter, who'd managed to impress one of the wealthiest families in town. And I would be invisible forgotten, the servant who'd made it all possible but deserved no recognition. That's when I made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. I pulled out my phone and opened a travel website searching for flights leaving tonight. If Emma wanted to claim credit for my work, she could also handle the consequences when that work disappeared. If my parents wanted to treat me like hired help, they could discover what happened when the help decided to quit. I found a red-eye flight to Rome, departing at 11:45 tonight. It was expensive, more than I could really afford, but my credit card would cover it. Rome had always been my dream destination, a city full of art and history and culture that I'd never been able to visit because every spare dollar went toward helping my family or surviving on my own. As I stared at the booking page, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of freedom. Tonight, Emma could face her engagement announcement in an empty house with no decorations, no feast, and no magical atmosphere. She could explain to Marcus's wealthy parents why the promised sophisticated evening had become an embarrassing disaster. She could finally experience the consequences of building her life on stolen foundations. I clicked purchase and felt the first genuine smile I'd had in months spread across my face. Emma's perfect evening was about to become her worst nightmare, and for the first time in my adult life, I was choosing myself over my family's expectations. While Emma continued her phone conversations about her perfect party planning, I decided to finish cleaning my father's home office before the guests arrived. Robert prided himself on his organized workspace with filing cabinets full of client documents and family papers arranged with accountant precision. As I dusted his desk, I accidentally knocked over a stack of folders, sending papers cascading across the floor. As I gathered the scattered documents, one file folder caught my attention because my name was written across the tab in my father's handwriting. Curiosity overcame propriety, and I opened it to find papers that would shatter what remained of my trust in my family. The first document was a copy of my grandmother's will from 3 years ago. My beloved grandmother Dorothy had always been my strongest supporter, the one family member who recognized my potential and encouraged my dreams. I remembered her funeral, the grief I'd felt losing the only person who truly understood me, and the small comfort my parents had offered when they mentioned she'd left me something in her will. "There's some money for you," my father had said at the time, "but it's tied up in estate proceedings. These things take time to sort out. We'll let you know when it's available." 3 years had passed, and I'd assumed the legal issues were complex. My parents occasionally mentioned ongoing complications with the estate, always vague about details but assuring me they were handling everything. I trusted them completely, never thinking to question their management of my inheritance. The will was clear and unambiguous. Dorothy had left me $50,000 with instructions that the money be used to help me pursue his dreams and build the independent life he deserves. The language was unmistakably her voice, full of the love and encouragement she'd always shown me. The date on the will showed it had been executed properly with no legal complications that would delay distribution. My hands shook as I turned to the next document: bank statements from an account I'd never seen before. The statements showed my inheritance had been deposited into an account bearing my father's name as trustee 3 years ago. But instead of holding the money for me, they'd been systematically withdrawing it for Emma's expenses. $10,000 for professional photography equipment, $8,000 for a designer wardrobe Emma claimed she'd saved for, $5,000 for the laptop and editing software she used for content creation, $4,000 for her car repairs when she'd crashed her vehicle texting while driving, $3,000 for her spring break vacation to Cabo that she documented across social media. The withdrawals continued chronologically, each one carefully noted with Emma's name in the memo field. Hair extensions, dental work, fitness classes, spa treatments, designer handbags she'd shown off online. My inheritance had funded Emma's entire lifestyle, while I struggled to pay rent, ate ramen noodles for dinner, and worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. The most recent statement showed only $12,000 remained of my original $50,000. 3/4 of my grandmother's gift had been stolen to support Emma's fraudulent success, while I remained unaware and struggling. But the cruelest discovery came next: a text message chain printed from my father's phone, probably for tax purposes. The messages between Robert and Patricia discussed my inheritance with casual callousness that took my breath away. "Ferdinand doesn't need to know about the money yet," Robert had texted. "Emma can make better use of it right now. She has real potential, and this could help her business take off." Patricia's response was even worse. "Agreed. Ferdinand would probably just waste it on some silly dream. Emma understands investment and building a brand. The money is safer with us managing it." Another exchange from 6 months ago showed their ongoing deception. "Do we tell Ferdinand about the remaining balance?" Robert had asked. "Not yet," Patricia replied. "Emma needs new equipment for her consulting business, and Ferdinand seems happy enough in his little apartment. He doesn't even ask about it anymore." Their dismissal of my financial struggles, their casual theft of my inheritance, their complete lack of concern for my well-being. It was all documented in black and white. But the final message in the chain revealed something that made my blood run cold. What if Ferdinand finds out Robert had texted just 2 weeks ago? "He won't," Patricia had replied. "And even if he does, what can he do? We're his parents. He wouldn't want to cause family drama over money. They'd been counting on my loyalty, my reluctance to rock the boat, my years of conditioning, to prioritize family harmony over my own needs. They'd stolen my financial independence and assumed I was too weak or too devoted to fight back. I kept reading, finding more evidence of their manipulation. A loan application where Robert had used my remaining inheritance as collateral for Emma's new car. If the loan defaulted, the last $12,000 of my grandmother's gift would vanish forever. They'd literally gambled away my future to buy Emma a luxury vehicle she'd claimed to have purchased through her successful business ventures. The paper trail showed systematic financial abuse spanning 3 years. Every time Emma needed money, they dipped into my inheritance. Every time I'd struggled financially, they'd had my money available, but chose not to tell me. Every time I'd worked extra hours or skipped meals to save money, they'd been funding Emma's lifestyle with resources that legally belonged to me. I found one final document that completed the picture, a financial planning spreadsheet in my father's careful handwriting. It showed projected expenses for Emma's upcoming wedding, with line items totaling nearly $15,000. The funding source was listed as Ferdinand's account. They were planning to use my entire remaining inheritance to pay for Emma's engagement celebration and wedding expenses. My grandmother's money, intended to help me build independence and pursue dreams, would instead fund the marriage celebration of the sister who'd been stealing my work and taking credit for my achievements. The symmetry of the betrayal was almost poetic in its cruelty. As I sat in my father's office, surrounded by evidence of 3 years of systematic theft and deception, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't just about money or favoritism anymore. This was about my family's complete disregard for my worth as a human being. They'd stolen my inheritance, exploited my labor, dismissed my achievements, and planned to continue using me indefinitely while building Emma's success on my stolen foundations. I carefully photographed every document, every bank statement, every text message. The evidence was overwhelming and legally damning. My parents had committed inheritance fraud, and Emma had been the knowing beneficiary of stolen money. They'd built their golden child's success on theft while keeping me trapped in financial struggle. But I also realized something else I had power they didn't know about. The inheritance theft was a felony. Emma's content fraud was intellectual property theft. They'd created a house of cards built on criminal behavior, and I held all the evidence needed to bring it crashing down. I replaced all the documents exactly as I'd found them, making sure the office looked undisturbed. My family was downstairs, probably discussing final preparations for Emma's engagement announcement, completely unaware that their years of manipulation and theft were about to end. I looked at my phone and saw the airline confirmation for my flight to Rome. In just a few hours, I would be free of this toxic dynamic forever. But I wouldn't leave quietly. I wouldn't disappear without ensuring my family faced consequences for their actions. Emma wanted to announce her engagement, surrounded by stolen beauty and fraudulent success. She could explain to Marcus's wealthy family why her perfect evening had become a legal and social disaster. My parents wanted to continue stealing my inheritance and exploiting my labor. They could face the criminal charges their actions deserved. For 3 years, they'd counted on my silence, my loyalty, my reluctance to cause family drama. Tonight, they would discover that even the most patient person has limits, and I'd finally reach mine. I walked downstairs to continue my preparations, but everything had changed. I wasn't preparing for Emma's triumph anymore. I was setting the stage for her downfall, and I was finally going to get the justice my grandmother had wanted me to have all along. Instead of confronting my family immediately with what I'd discovered, I channeled my rage into something far more strategic. Years of being overlooked and underestimated had taught me patience, and now that patience would serve me well. I continued my party preparations with mechanical precision while my mind raced through the legal and practical implications of what I'd uncovered. First, I needed to understand my rights regarding the inheritance theft. Using my phone, I researched inheritance law and discovered that my parents had no legal authority to manage my inheritance without court-appointed guardianship or my explicit consent. What they'd done constituted felony theft, punishable by significant fines and potential prison time. The fact that they documented their theft in text messages and bank statements would make prosecution straightforward. Next, I focused on Emma's intellectual property theft. I spent my lunch break at work that week documenting every instance of stolen content I could identify. Screenshots of her social media posts with timestamps, email chains from her business accounts, marketing materials she'd created using my strategies. The evidence was overwhelming and would be devastating to her online reputation and business relationships. I also researched the legal implications of her fraud. Using someone else's intellectual property for commercial gain without permission constituted both copyright infringement and business fraud. The fact that she'd been charging other influencers for consultation based on stolen knowledge made her actions even more legally problematic. While dusting the living room, I overheard Emma on another phone call that provided crucial information about tonight's timeline. The engagement announcement was planned for 8:30 right after dinner and before dessert. Marcus had coordinated with our parents to have his family seated at specific positions around the table for optimal photography. Emma had already arranged for a professional photographer to capture the moment, someone she'd hired using money that I now knew had been stolen from my inheritance. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. My own stolen money would pay for documenting Emma's moment of triumph in a setting I'd created using skills she'd stolen from me. But that gave me an idea for perfect timing. I contacted a lawyer specializing in inheritance disputes and intellectual property theft. The consultation fee strained my already tight budget, but the lawyer's assessment was worth every penny. Not only did I have strong legal cases on both fronts, but the evidence was so comprehensive that she recommended immediate action. "Your parents committed inheritance fraud," she explained during our phone call. "The text messages show premeditation and intent to permanently deprive you of your property. That's a felony in this state." She also confirmed that Emma's content theft constituted multiple violations of intellectual property law. If you can prove she's been monetizing your stolen work, the damages could be substantial. She'd be liable for all profits derived from your intellectual property, plus punitive damages. The lawyer agreed to file preliminary paperwork immediately and serve legal notices to all parties involved right after Christmas. She also provided me with documentation proving my legal ownership of the inheritance, which would be crucial for recovering the stolen funds. But I wanted more than legal victory. I wanted public exposure that would destroy the false image my family had built on stolen foundations. Emma's influencer career depended entirely on her reputation for authenticity and creativity. Marcus's wealthy family valued integrity and social standing above all else. My parents prided themselves on their respectable, suburban image. They'd all built their identities on lies, and I was about to reveal the truth to everyone who mattered. I spent the afternoon crafting a detailed message that would expose everything simultaneously. The message included photo evidence of the inheritance theft screenshots, proving Emma's intellectual property, fraud legal documentation, confirming my ownership of the stolen money, and a timeline showing 3 years of systematic deception. But I didn't want the message to seem like an angry rant. I wrote it carefully, professionally, presenting facts without emotional manipulation. I wanted people to draw their own conclusions from the evidence, rather than dismissing my claims as family drama. The message would go to a carefully selected group: my parents, Emma Marcus, and his family, Emma's major business contacts, and sponsors, her social media followers, and several family friends who'd witnessed years of Emma being praised for achievements that weren't hers. I also planned to send copies to local media outlets, since the story of inheritance theft and influencer fraud would likely generate public interest. The timing would be crucial. I wanted the message to arrive during Emma's engagement announcement, turning her moment of triumph into public humiliation. While she was accepting congratulations for her perfect party planning, and Marcus was celebrating their future together, their phones would buzz with evidence that Emma's entire persona was built on fraud and theft. I also made practical preparations for my departure. I packed a small bag with essentials and hid it in my car. I researched transportation to the airport and confirmed my flight details. I even looked up hotels in Rome where I could stay while figuring out my next steps. For the first time in years, I was planning for my own future instead of serving my family's needs. As evening approached and guests began arriving, I felt a strange sense of calm. My family was bustling around, putting final touches on the celebration they'd taken for granted I would provide. Emma emerged from her room, looking stunning in a designer dress I now knew had been purchased with my stolen inheritance money. My parents greeted Marcus's family with the kind of warmth and attention they'd never shown me. The house looked absolutely perfect, if I did say so myself. Every surface gleamed, the dining room table was set like something from a magazine, and the aroma of my carefully prepared feast filled the air. Emma's guests complimented the elegant atmosphere and sophisticated menu praise that made my parents beam with pride for their talented daughter's hosting abilities. But I knew something they didn't. In just a few hours, this perfect evening would become the worst night of their lives. Emma's engagement announcement would be overshadowed by public exposure of her fraud. Marcus would learn that his fiancée's entire persona was built on stolen foundations. My parents would face both criminal charges and social disgrace. The perfect image they'd worked so hard to maintain would crumble in front of the very people they'd been trying to impress. I served cocktails and appetizers with a genuine smile for the first time in months. Every compliment the guests paid to Emma's planning abilities, every praise for the beautiful atmosphere, every comment about her obvious talent and creativity, it all felt like justice delayed but not denied. Soon, everyone would know the truth. As I watched Emma accept compliments for work she'd never done wearing clothes purchased with money she'd never earned preparing to announce an engagement in a setting she'd never created, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete confidence in my own worth. I wasn't the family failure they'd made me believe I was. I wasn't less talented or less valuable than Emma. I was the invisible architect of their success. And tonight I was going to step out of the shadows forever. The only question remaining was whether I'd stay to watch the fallout or be safely on a plane to Rome when their world collapsed. Either way, I was finally free. And they were about to discover what happened when they pushed the wrong person too far for too long. As the evening progressed and dinner was served, I moved through the house like a ghost, invisible to the guests who complimented every detail of the celebration. Emma held court at the head of the table, graciously accepting praise for the incredible menu she'd designed and the stunning aesthetic she'd created. Marcus's parents, Harold and Eleanor Henderson, were clearly impressed by what they saw as Emma's sophisticated taste and attention to detail. "You have such a gift for entertaining, dear," Eleanor told Emma during the main course. "The flavor combinations are inspired, and this presentation is restaurant quality. You must have trained professionally." Emma smiled modestly, playing the role of humble hostess to perfection. "I just love creating beautiful experiences for people I care about. I spent months planning every detail because I wanted tonight to be special." I served the wine my parents had asked me to select, watching Marcus beam with pride at his talented girlfriend, while his father discussed business opportunities with my parents. The conversation flowed exactly as my family had hoped, with the Hendersons clearly viewing Emma as a worthy addition to their wealthy, successful family. At 8:15, just as I was clearing the dinner plates, my father gave me a subtle nod toward the kitchen. The signal we'd arranged for me to disappear so Emma and Marcus could have their moment. I was supposed to retreat to the kitchen like the hired help invisible and forgotten, while my sister accepted the proposal I'd unknowingly helped orchestrate. Instead, I walked calmly upstairs to my childhood bedroom and retrieved my overnight bag. I'd already moved my car to the street earlier, parked where it wouldn't be noticed missing until morning. My flight didn't leave for 3 hours, but I wanted to be long gone before the evening's drama reached its climax. As I headed toward the back door, I could hear the conversation in the dining room shifting to the intimate tone that preceded important announcements. Marcus's voice carried clearly as he began what sounded like a prepared speech about love and commitment and building a future together. That's when I pulled out my phone and sent the message that would change everything. The group text went to 27 recipients simultaneously. My parents Emma, Marcus, Harold, and Eleanor Henderson. Emma's major sponsors and business contacts, her photographer for the evening, several family friends, and a carefully selected group of her most influential followers. I'd crafted the message over several drafts to ensure maximum impact. I need to share something important that affects everyone who knows Emma and our family. For 3 years, my parents have been stealing my inheritance from my grandmother to fund Emma's lifestyle and business. I've discovered bank statements and text messages proving they've taken $38,000 that legally belongs to me. Emma has been living on stolen money while I struggled financially. Additionally, Emma's entire influencer career and business success is built on intellectual property theft. She's been stealing my marketing strategies, campaign ideas, and creative content for years, then presenting them as her original work to sponsors and clients. I have timestamps, email evidence, and documentation proving everything. I've contacted lawyers and will be pursuing criminal charges for inheritance fraud and intellectual property theft. The attached photos show bank statements, legal documents, and evidence of the systematic fraud that's been happening. Emma's engagement party tonight was planned and executed entirely by me using decorations I designed, food I prepared, and my stolen money. I will not be present when you read this message, as I've chosen to remove myself from this toxic situation permanently. Everyone deserves to know the truth about the people they're supporting and the money they're celebrating with. I attached 18 photos documenting everything: bank statements showing the inheritance theft, screenshots of Emma's stolen content with timestamps, text messages between my parents discussing their deception, legal documents proving my ownership of the inheritance, and before and after comparisons showing Emma's posts next to my original work. The message was sent at exactly 8:28 2 minutes before Marcus was scheduled to propose. I could hear his voice reaching the emotional crescendo of his speech as I slipped out the back door and walked to my car. As I drove toward the airport, I turned off my phone's notification sounds, but left it on, watching the screen light up repeatedly as responses flooded in. The timing had been perfect. My message had arrived during the most important moment of Emma's life, turning her engagement announcement into a public scandal. I imagined the scene playing out behind me. Marcus mid-proposal as phones began buzzing around the table. The confusion as guests checked their messages and discovered evidence of theft and fraud. Emma's face as she realized years of deception were being exposed to everyone who mattered. My parents' panic as they understood their crimes were being documented and shared. The Hendersons, who valued reputation and integrity above all else, learning that their son's fiancée was a fraud and a thief. The photographer, capturing not a romantic proposal, but the moment Emma's world collapsed. The elegant evening I'd created becoming the backdrop for the destruction of everything my family had built on stolen foundations. By the time I reached the airport, my phone showed 43 missed calls and 87 text messages. The responses were varied but universally shocked. Harold Henderson had texted asking for clarification about the serious allegations. Emma's major sponsor had sent a message about reviewing their partnership in light of concerning information. Several family friends had expressed disbelief and demanded explanations. But I didn't read the messages from my family. I didn't want to see their panic, their anger, their desperate attempts to control the narrative. I was done being manipulated by their emotions and guilt trips. For the first time in my adult life, I was choosing my own well-being over their expectations. As I checked in for my flight, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of their constant demands, their casual exploitation, their systematic theft of my work and money, it was all behind me now. I wasn't their servant anymore, their scapegoat, their invisible source of unpaid labor. I was free. The gate agent processed my boarding pass with professional efficiency, unaware that she was helping someone escape a lifetime of family manipulation. I found a quiet corner of the departure lounge and finally allowed myself to think about what came next. Rome had always represented everything I dreamed of, but never thought I could afford art, history, culture, the freedom to explore and create without serving someone else's agenda. With my inheritance recovered through legal action, I'd finally have the financial independence I'd been denied for 3 years. But more importantly, I'd proven to myself that I was capable of decisive action when necessary. I wasn't the weak, accommodating family member they'd taken advantage of for so long. I was someone who could research legal options, document evidence plans strategically, and execute a plan that would protect my interests and expose the truth. As my flight began boarding, I turned my phone completely off. Whatever chaos was unfolding at home, whatever messages were flooding in, whatever consequences my family was facing, none of it was my responsibility anymore. I was walking toward a new life built on my own terms, leaving behind people who'd proven they didn't deserve my loyalty, my work, or my presence in their lives. Emma could explain to Marcus why her perfect engagement announcement had become a public scandal. My parents could face the legal consequences of inheritance theft. They could all figure out how to rebuild their reputations after years of success built on stolen foundations. I was going to Rome to start over, and for the first time in my adult life, I was excited about my future. From my hotel room in Rome, overlooking the ancient cobblestones of Trastevere, I watched my family's carefully constructed world collapse through social media and updates from my lawyer. The 6-hour time difference meant I was having morning coffee, while they were dealing with the nightmarish aftermath of their exposed lies. My lawyer called first, her voice professional, but clearly pleased with how quickly things were moving. Ferdinand, the response to your evidence has been extraordinary. The Henderson family contacted me directly this morning. They're furious about the fraud allegations and want nothing to do with your family. Marcus broke off the engagement publicly on social media around midnight your time. The news should have made me sad. Marcus genuinely seemed like a decent guy who'd been deceived as thoroughly as everyone else, but I felt only relief that he'd discovered Emma's true nature before legally binding himself to a fraud. What about the inheritance theft? I asked, sipping espresso while pigeons gathered on my small balcony. Your parents' lawyer contacted us at 7 this morning. They want to negotiate immediate restitution to avoid criminal charges. They're willing to return the full $50,000 plus interest and damages. The bank statements you provided make prosecution a certainty, so they're trying to minimize consequences. I set down my coffee cup, hardly believing what I was hearing. After 3 years of being told the money was tied up in legal complications, my parents were suddenly able to produce the full amount overnight when facing felony charges. There's more, my lawyer continued. Emma's major sponsors are dropping her contracts. That luxury skincare brand sent a formal letter terminating their agreement and demanding return of payments made for campaigns based on stolen intellectual property. Her talent agency dropped her this morning, and several influencers she was consulting for are threatening legal action. I pulled up Emma's social media accounts on my phone and saw the destruction in real time. Her Instagram comments were flooded with angry messages from followers who felt deceived. Brand partners were distancing themselves publicly, posting statements about not tolerating fraud or stolen content. Her follower count was dropping rapidly as people shared screenshots of my evidence. The most damning development was that other marketing professionals had come forward with similar experiences. 3 different influencers posted detailed threads explaining how Emma had approached them for collaboration, then used their shared ideas in her own content without credit or compensation. My exposure had opened floodgates for other victims of her theft. Marcus had posted a dignified statement on his company's social media. After learning of serious ethical and legal issues involving my former fiancé, I have ended our relationship. Henderson Development Group maintains the highest standards of integrity and cannot associate with fraudulent business practices. The statement was professionally written, probably by his family's legal team, but the personal pain was obvious. Marcus had genuinely loved Emma, or at least the version of Emma that existed before he learned about her systematic deception. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a familiar voice made my stomach clench. Ferdinand, it's Mom. Patricia's voice was strained, exhausted, completely different from her usual confident tone. We need to talk. This has gotten out of hand. Can you please come home so we can work this out as a family? I'm in Rome, I said simply. And there's nothing to work out. You stole my inheritance and enabled Emma's fraud for 3 years. I documented everything and turned it over to lawyers. The consequences are appropriate. You don't understand the damage you've caused. She continued, desperation creeping into her voice. Emma's career is destroyed. Marcus's family is threatening legal action. Your father's accounting firm is losing clients because of the scandal. You've ruined everything over a misunderstanding about money. The audacity was breathtaking. Even facing overwhelming evidence of their crimes, she was trying to frame their systematic theft and deception as a misunderstanding, while blaming me for the consequences of their actions. "Mom, you stole $38,000 from me and documented your theft in text messages." Emma built her entire career on intellectual property she stole from me. These aren't misunderstandings, these are crimes with victims, and I was the victim. But we're family. Patricia's voice broke the manipulative emotion that had controlled me for years. Family works things out privately. You didn't have to humiliate us publicly. You humiliated yourselves by committing fraud. I just documented what you did. I hung up and turned off my phone, not wanting to hear more desperate attempts at manipulation. From my hotel balcony, I could see tourists photographing the ancient Roman architecture couples sharing wine at outdoor cafes, street artists creating beauty for anyone willing to appreciate it. The contrast with my family's toxic dysfunction was stark and liberating. Over the following days, I explored Rome with genuine wonder for the first time since childhood. Without the constant stress of my family's demands, I rediscovered interests I'd forgotten I had. I spent hours in art museums, sketched architectural details in cafes, took photographs of street scenes that captured the city's timeless energy. I also began documenting my experience through a travel blog, using the marketing skills I'd developed to build something authentic and personal. The contrast between my honest content and Emma's stolen empire became a powerful story that resonated with readers who'd experienced similar family exploitation. Within a week, my blog gained thousands of followers who appreciated the combination of travel content and personal growth narrative. Several travel companies reached out about collaboration opportunities, impressed by my authentic voice and professional presentation. For the first time, I was building success on my own merit instead of watching someone else take credit for my work. My lawyer called with updates that felt like scenes from a justice-focused television show. My parents had agreed to return my full inheritance plus $25,000 in damages and legal fees. Emma faced multiple lawsuits from defrauded sponsors and clients with total damages potentially exceeding $60,000. The scandal had been picked up by marketing industry publications as a cautionary tale about influencer fraud. But the most satisfying news came from an unexpected source. Marcus called me directly, his voice genuine and apologetic. "Ferdinand, I wanted to personally thank you for exposing the truth," he said. "I know this must have been incredibly difficult, but you saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Emma and I were planning to combine our business assets after marriage. I would have been legally liable for her fraud. He paused, clearly emotional. "I also want to apologize for my family's role in pressuring you to create the perfect evening for our announcement. We had no idea you were being exploited, but we benefited from your stolen labor. That's not acceptable." The apology meant more than Marcus probably realized. For years, I'd watched successful people praise Emma's abilities, while I remained invisible. Having someone acknowledge my actual contributions and apologize for unknowingly participating in my exploitation felt like healing. 3 weeks into my Roman adventure, I received an email that changed everything. A major marketing firm in Chicago had seen my travel blog and read about my experience with intellectual property theft. They were offering me a director position, focused on authentic content strategy, with a salary that would double my previous income. Your experience with recognizing and documenting content fraud gives you unique qualifications for helping clients protect their intellectual property, the hiring manager explained during our video interview. Plus, your personal brand development through the travel blog shows you understand authentic storytelling. I accepted the position immediately. My family's betrayal had inadvertently launched me toward the career advancement I'd never thought possible. Their theft and exploitation had forced me to document my skills, research my legal rights, and ultimately showcase my abilities to people who could recognize my true value. As I prepared to leave Rome for my new life in Chicago, I felt profound gratitude for the courage I'd found to choose myself over my family's dysfunction. Their systematic abuse had nearly destroyed my sense of self-worth. but surviving their betrayal had proven I was stronger and more capable than they'd ever allowed me to believe. Emma's influencer empire had crumbled. My parents faced ongoing legal and financial consequences, and I'd launched myself toward genuine success built on my own merit. Justice wasn't just served, it was comprehensive, appropriate, and deeply satisfying. For the first time in my adult life, I was excited about my future, confident in my abilities, and surrounded by people who valued my contributions. The family that had stolen my work, my money, and my recognition had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible, proof that I was strong enough to rebuild my life without them. 6 months later, I stood in my new Chicago apartment looking out at Lake Michigan while preparing for my own celebration, a housewarming party for friends who knew and appreciated the real me. The contrast with that Christmas Eve disaster felt like comparing night and day despair and hope theft and authenticity. My legal battles had concluded with complete victory. The court ordered my parents to pay the full $50,000 inheritance plus $35,000 in damages and legal fees. Emma faced judgments totaling $87,000 from various fraud lawsuits, effectively bankrupting her stolen empire. More importantly, the public record of their crimes meant they could never again build success on stolen foundations. My father's accounting firm lost several major clients who couldn't associate with someone involved in inheritance fraud. My mother's social standing in their suburban community evaporated as neighbors learned about their systematic theft from their own son. Emma's influencer career never recovered, and she was forced to take a minimum wage retail job while struggling with debt from the lawsuits. But the most satisfying consequence was watching them face the reality they'd tried to avoid for years. They actually had to take responsibility for their own lives without exploiting my labor or stealing my achievements. My own transformation had been remarkable. The marketing director position in Chicago challenged me professionally while respecting my contributions. My colleagues valued my insights, credited my successes, and promoted me based on actual merit rather than family connections or stolen work. For the first time in my adult life, I was building a career where my efforts directly benefited my future. The travel blog I'd started in Rome had evolved into a successful side business, with sponsorship deals and speaking engagements about authentic content creation and overcoming family exploitation. The irony wasn't lost on me that Emma's fraud had positioned me as an expert on genuine storytelling and intellectual property protection. I'd also used my recovered inheritance wisely, investing in my education through marketing certifications and professional development courses I'd never been able to afford. The money my grandmother intended to help me build independence had finally served its purpose just 3 years later than planned. My dating life had improved dramatically once I learned to recognize healthy relationship dynamics. Years of family manipulation had normalized toxic behavior, but therapy helped me understand the difference between love and exploitation. I was now in a committed relationship with Sarah, a graphic designer who supported my growth and celebrated my successes without trying to claim credit for my achievements. Most importantly, I'd learned to set boundaries that protected my well-being. When my parents attempted reconciliation approaches through relatives and family friends, I maintained firm but polite distance. I wasn't interested in rebuilding relationships with people who'd proven they viewed me as a resource to exploit rather than a person to respect. Emma had tried reaching out several times, always with requests for help or advice about rebuilding her career. Each message confirmed she still didn't understand the fundamental problem. She wanted assistance with creating success rather than doing the work to earn it legitimately. I declined all contact, knowing she hadn't changed and would likely repeat her fraudulent behavior given the opportunity. The family members and friends who'd witnessed years of my exploitation but remained silent during the abuse had also been permanently removed from my life. I'd learned that people who enable abuse by staying neutral are choosing the abuser's side, and I deserved relationships with people who would speak up for what's right. But I'd also built new family connections, with people who appreciated authentic relationships. Sarah's family welcomed me warmly, treating me with the respect and consideration I'd never experienced from my biological family. My colleagues had become genuine friends who celebrated my successes and offered support during challenges. As I prepared appetizers for my housewarming party, I reflected on how different this felt from that Christmas Eve nightmare. Tonight's guests were people who knew my real story, who'd seen me build success through legitimate effort, who valued my contributions to their lives. The food I was preparing would be enjoyed by people who appreciated my efforts rather than taking them for granted. The decorations I'd chosen reflected my actual taste rather than someone else's vision. The conversations would be genuine rather than performative. The success being celebrated was authentically mine built through my work and protected by my boundaries. My grandmother Dorothy would have been proud to see how her inheritance ultimately served its intended purpose. The money she'd left to help me pursue independence had freed me from family exploitation and launched me toward the life she'd always believed I deserved. Her faith in my potential had been vindicated even though it took legal action to claim what she'd tried to give me. The most profound lesson I'd learned was that family relationships require mutual respect to be healthy. Blood relations don't justify abuse, and loyalty shouldn't enable exploitation. True love supports growth and celebrates achievements rather than stealing credit or demanding servitude. I'd also discovered that standing up for yourself isn't selfish or cruel, even when others frame it that way. Protecting your well-being, enforcing your boundaries, and demanding fair treatment are acts of self-respect that benefit everyone involved. People who genuinely care about you want you to be strong and independent, not exploited and diminished. The courage to leave toxic situations, even difficult ones involving family, opens space for healthier relationships to develop. By removing people who didn't value my contributions, I'd made room for people who celebrated my success and supported my growth. As my guests began arriving, colleagues who respected my work friends, who enjoyed my company, Sarah, who loved me for who I actually was rather than what I could provide, I felt deep gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. That Christmas Eve confrontation with my family's systematic abuse had been terrifying, but it had also been liberating. Learning to choose myself over their expectations had been the most important decision of my life, opening doors to authentic success and genuine relationships I'd never thought possible. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from people who consistently diminish your worth. Family doesn't mean accepting abuse, and love doesn't require enabling exploitation. Your value isn't determined by other people's treatment of you, and you always have the power to choose relationships that honor your authentic self. True family, whether biological or chosen, celebrates your achievements, supports your growth, and respects your boundaries. Everyone deserves relationships built on mutual appreciation rather than one-sided exploitation, and it's never too late to claim the respect and recognition you've always merited. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from family members who didn't respect your worth? How did you find the courage to put your well-being first when others called you selfish for protecting yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else recognize their own strength. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building authentic success. And share this with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve better treatment than they're accepting. Thank you for listening to my journey from exploitation to empowerment. Remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition, and you have every right to demand the respect you deserve. Here's to building relationships that celebrate your authentic self and support your genuine dreams.